right, welcome everyone. We're going to get started. This is our third webinar in our Smart Strategy series. Today's topic is Chief Resilience Officer, you. My name is Raven Rankin and I'm the Manager of Client Experience at the NECA company. I'm going to be your webinar host for today. Just to give you a little bit more information about the NECA company, it is a leadership development firm located in Washington, D.C. and Atlanta. NECA works at the intersection of leadership, strategy, leadership development, and culture, providing coaching, team coaching, and leadership development. We are known for strategic vision and planning, as well as culture change work. Today, we're delighted to share insights from more than 16 years of coaching and working with leaders. But before we begin, I'd like to give you a few basic instructions on how to interact with the webinar today. Today, you'll be able to participate via poll and chat, and we'll let you know when it's time to do so. And please do participate in the poll. We always love seeing everyone's answers. And if you have a question, you may pose it using the chat function or the Q&A function. And if any time during the webinar you're having technical difficulties, please feel free to send me a private chat or an email. I'm going to put my email in the chat box for your reference. And now I'd like to introduce our speaker, Kate Abner. Kate Abner is the founder and CEO of the NECA company, as well as a top leadership coach, facilitator, and the founding director of Georgetown University's Institute for Transformation Leadership. Kate works with CEOs, senior leaders, and executive women. She's passionate about leading, about helping leaders and teams make their visions real. Kate.
I want to just welcome you today and say thank you for joining us. This is the third in our series of 4 webinars, and we are excited to be bringing you this series. We feel like it's timely and hopefully useful. So I just want to reiterate what Raven said and encourage you to ask questions, participate in the chat, and help us really make this relevant and meaningful for you. I'm going to be putting myself off of video during this presentation, but I will come back on again at the end, and I'm here, so I'll do that. All right, so our opportunity today is to discover how to support your team's resilience through intentional leadership behaviors and actions that really bring focus, purpose, and motivation to others. And I think this topic, Chief Resilience Officer, in parentheses, you, comes out of the realization that many people had a little more than a month ago, that not only are you managing your own resilience and sustainability, but you actually need to be thinking about the resilience of others, your teams, your organizations, your families. And so with people looking to you for their own perspective and support, the question is, how do you think about that so that you can really provide that support and bring that, I think, focus and intentional action to your relationships and to your responsibilities at this time? We're leading in a time of uncertainty, as we all know, and you may have heard me say on a different webinar that I think this language, a time of uncertainty, is a new phrase that has emerged from this period, and there's all kinds of new language coming out of this time. And so we're just going to start off by, claiming that phrase. You are a leader, whether it's at home or at work, in a time of great uncertainty, a time of crisis, a time of an unprecedented time. And you are responsible for understanding what leading means at this time. When I think about the word leading, it implies that you're leading people somewhere. I know all of us are having a challenge right now because of the volatility, the uncertainty, the complexity, and the ambiguity, the VUCA, as we call it, actually seeing where we're going, and never mind trying to explain that and bring that perspective to others. In times before coronavirus, we also were struggling with fast-paced, overwork, complexity, and the need to be able to see ahead in rapidly changing times. We've added the COVID-19 threat to our environment, and that's an existential threat. By that I mean it's a threat that is threatening our very existence, our way of life, our set of beliefs and assumptions about the world we live in and about the future. So this is a lot. This is a lot to manage. It's a lot to take in. And I think at any given moment, you probably feel like from a resilience perspective, you're doing well, or maybe you're not doing as well. So with that in mind, we want to give you some strategies today. And this presentation actually has quite a lot of detailed ideas in it for you. And so we'll make sure to get it to you afterwards, and so that you can access it as a resource going forward from there. We're going to start with a little bit of a poll. And the question is, in the past few weeks, what has changed your resilience the most? What has challenged your resilience the most? And Raven's going to actually run the poll for us and give you a chance to take a vote. And we've offered some options here, and would love to just get a sense from those who are participating of where you see your resilience challenges right now. You can go ahead and take the poll when you're ready.
Sounds good. Some of our options are loved ones and colleagues who are ill, uncertainty about the future, the economic downturn, loss of usual routines, new responsibilities with family, including your young children. So I'm just going to give you about 10 more seconds to vote, and then we're going to share the results. Alrighty, if you haven't, you have 2 more seconds to vote in the poll. So thank you for voting. Some of our top answers were uncertainty about the future. I know, definitely feeling that as well. The economic downturn, secondly, and quite varied answers. Kate, do you have any other additional thoughts about these results?
I'm not surprised to see that the top vote was uncertainty about the future. I think the question of week 6 that I've heard people ask over and over again, and I've heard it almost at every day, at least probably 4 times, is when will this end? And then the other part of that is, where will we be when this is over? And so I think that those questions are coming out of that, the relentlessness of just not knowing, and our deep desire to have something come clear. I also think the economic downturn, which seems to be sort of taking shape before our eyes, and I think we're beginning to get inklings of the dimensions of that, is also very concerning, and can lead to some of the other things that are up here, such as the loss of a job, or not knowing when we're going to return to work, stagnation and restlessness after weeks of social distancing and loss of usual routines. I think people have been incredibly resilient, Raven, and I think that it's understandable that we are continuing to experience some challenges to our resilience, because we just don't know what's coming next. All right, so thank you for that. And we're going to talk for a moment about the emotion of fear, which is actually also being felt right now. So what we're doing is we're framing the resilience challenge, if you will, because you, as Chief Resilience Officer, need to understand, I think, a little bit about the dimensions of it. You certainly probably do from your own personal experience. But one of the things that we've been following is the work of David Rock and the Neuro Leadership Institute. They offered a wonderful webcast last week, and they were talking. David was talking about these 3 levels of fear that actually act differently in our brains and have different effects. Level 1, he described as when the bear is across the valley in the general vicinity, but not too close, and you're at a state of heightened alert. And he said level 2 is more like when you hear the bear roar, you realize it's over the hill in your neighborhood. It's not right at your doorstep yet, but maybe at that point you take some precautions and you sort of tighten things up and prepare yourself for the possibility that that bear could come to your neighborhood. And he said, level 3 is when you're being attacked by the bear, when the bear is upon you. And at that moment, you are in a fight or flight moment. You're fighting for your very survival. And he asked actually in this webcast for people to take a poll about where they felt their level of fear really was. And what was interesting is on I think it was a Friday afternoon on a relatively calm day with most of us still practicing social distancing in our homes and home offices, more than 50% of participants named that they were at a level 2, and another, I would say, I think it was 15 or 17% were at level 3. And then the rest were at level 1 or even a level 0, which is to say, I'm not worried at all. I'm not feeling anxiety. What stood out to me about that is that as Dr. Rock went on to talk about it, he really said when you're at a level 2 or a level 3, your brain is functioning very differently than if you're at a level 1 or a level 0. At level 2, you've begun to sort of, your anxiety is high, you've got a impairment to your judgment and decision making. At level 3, you absolutely can't think, right? You're in survival mode completely. And so what strikes me about that research that he was doing right there in his webcast was how many of us in the course of a regular day might be at a level 2 or 3, even though we are busy working from home or doing things around the house. We actually are managing a fairly high state of anxiety, and I'm sure that includes you, that you have your own levels of anxiety, and that probably goes up and down. I tested this earlier in the week with another audience and found that many people are indeed at level 1, and I think Dr. Rock felt that that was the appropriate level for most of us to be at. However, whenever we have to leave the house, whether it's to go to the grocery store or to exercise or do some other things, the level of anxiety or fear goes up. So we're navigating this. This is our resilience challenges. Yes, it's the planning and the strategizing for the future, but it's also just the management of our own moods and emotions by the day, by the hour. Many of us are also experiencing grief. And David Kessler's 6 stages of grief really introduce us to the sort of the path that grief takes. And it's interesting to think about that. There was a wonderful article in the Harvard Business Review, that uncomfortable feeling, parentheses, it's grief. I don't think I have the name quite right, but we'll include it in our materials as we follow up on this webcast. And what I think was really interesting about this grief process is you might not even realize that you're experiencing that discomfort. But the world has changed. There's been a loss of normalcy and sense of stability. There's a fear many of us have of the economic toll that this will take. There's a loss of connection from the familiar, a loss of safety. And I think there's also this thing called anticipatory grief, the feeling we get about what the future holds when we're uncertain. And this anticipatory grief could be the anticipation of bad news or death or a more broadly imagined crisis or future. Quite often, again, it's an existential feeling, this anticipatory grief. For whatever reasons, as human beings, we gear ourselves toward anticipating the worst. So again, we move through the stages of grief. At the denial stage, we might be thinking, oh, this virus won't affect us. And we certainly know people around us who are there. At the anger stage, you know, there might be anger about, I'm stuck at home. I am frustrated. You're making me stay home, right? We've heard those kinds of voices around us and even in the news. Bargaining. Okay, I'll stay home, but if I do, everything will be better, right? Like, this is the trade-off, right? You might hear that bargaining, like, I'll do this, but I'm expecting that, in that kind of mentality. And then actually we're missing sadness. I don't know where this will end. And then acceptance. This is happening. I have to figure out how to proceed. We'll find control and acceptance. I can wash my hands. I'll stay home. I can learn to work virtually. And then finally, the 6th stage, it's not visible for some reason on this page, is meaning making, as we start to move past acceptance and into the making of meaning about what has happened to us. So we're, at any given moment, we're moving around in there. I would have told you that I wasn't personally experiencing all of this, only to have a couple people point out to me that I was in the bargaining stage. So I would say, I would just invite you to notice the range of your own emotion, and actually also to realize that the people you're working with and managing and leading are often going to be navigating in these kinds of ebbs and flows. One big insight from this week's work is that not everybody's, although many things are happening to us all concurrently and simultaneously, we're not all in the same place at the same time. So I'd like you to just share in the chat box what you feel like you need from leaders in an unprecedented time like this. When you think about leaders who you look up to or who you're waiting to hear from perhaps about some of these things, what do you wish for? What do you feel like you need from your leaders? We're going to invite you to chat and see what we can learn from your perspective. Thank you, Stacy. Offered empathy, acceptance about a flexible work schedule, honesty, transparency, flexibility. I want a leader to make determinations based on facts and science, not gut feelings. Understand. Communication and transparency, to lift their heads and see more options. Honesty and confidence, compassion, sensibility. Future orientation with a clear-eyed assessment of the context. That's nice. Open communication. These are wonderful thoughts. Deborah offers us knowing we cannot meet the reactive ways we did things. We cannot necessarily return to those reactive ways. Being able to be flexible, right? So we think about what you're asking for is flexibility, compassion, understanding, adaptation, opportunism. What's the possibility in this moment that we could actually notice and grab hold of and actually change the future? So these are great responses, the chance to rethink, and you're welcome to keep them coming. I feel like if you're thinking about this for your own leadership, this list that we're getting in the chat is a perfectly good place to look for guidance about what people are craving right now. And we don't always have that in our leaders. As Deborah has noticed, we have a leader who doesn't seem to know things have changed, as she still places deadlines and demands, right? It's really interesting. We found ourselves in a conversation, I think about 10 days ago, with an organization, really pointing out to them that we're asking people to do their very best, but our very best right now is about 80% of what our very best was pre-coronavirus. And so what that means is that as a leader, you might feel like you're doing 120% and that you're not able to access as much capacity from your people as you were in the past. That's probably an accurate reading, but it's really important that you not move into a reactive state about that, but actually acknowledge that 80% is the new 100% given all the things going on in our backgrounds, right? And so I think that's right, Maria, work-life balance, because it becomes even more difficult at home and really overwhelming at times. So here's some good news. Extreme times can build great teams. This is coming from the work of Tom Kolditz, who was once a guest on a radio show that I used to have. He wrote the book In Extremis Leadership, and Tom is a student and a participant in the military. He was really interested in the difference between what leadership looks like in crisis versus, we'll call it, everyday leadership. And here's some of the insights, and I'm going to share more of them that he can offer us. And I think this is actually very helpful. Extreme times can build great teams. Dangerous contexts energize a team to even higher levels of development. I don't know if you've found that, but this feeling that we need to work together in these unprecedented conditions has actually catalyzed quite a number of teams and groups to higher levels of performance, more direct and clear communication, better results, right? We're working hard, in some cases feels like a fight for our lives, right? But that dangerous context can really bring us together. Dangerous environment causes team members to focus outward, be inherently motivated, and be intensely engaged. By focusing outward, we mean looking at the external environment, looking at what we need to accomplish in terms of goals and outcomes in a way that perhaps was more, it felt more laid back or optional in the past. The environment forces us to really measure our progress and know exactly where we are. The team aspect brings to light responsibility for others, awareness of others' needs and contributions, and reliance on others. So there's often an awakening of social consciousness, and you've seen that, I think, all over the world and in our country through the kind of offers and outreach and support that's happening. And I was joking with somebody yesterday, I did not know that American Express cared so much about me, but they've done a nice job of reaching out and saying, we care and here we are to help. And I think you're seeing that everywhere, this sort of awakened sense of support and help. And I think at the team level, people are putting aside some of their old stories and old differences to work better together. And I think coming to a much greater understanding of each other through this time, that these are things that can happen, and they can happen if you as a leader are consciously aware that this isn't just a time to say like, wait till it's over, but actually to use some of the adrenaline, some of the momentum of the crisis to bring people together in a focused way. So that's really what this page is talking about here. We want to define our challenge, and a crisis calls for a clear external focus. This is not about internal organizational. This is about our impact in the world, the results that we're getting, right? Without a clear external focus, the way ahead is sometimes not clear. We really need to define the problem that we're trying to solve or that we're trying to work on. You want to focus the motivated crew on new solutions, on problems that might seem impossible to solve or unresolved issues. And I will tell you that in the first 3 weeks of this pandemic, and so if I think of us as being in week 6 now, I would say in the weeks 1 and 2 in particular, it was very hard to get our heads around what direction to give people so that they could have focus, purpose, and help really row the boat through this period. I hope that at this point you've been able to kind of catalyze people with a clear focus on what's most important. And I think if you're still struggling with that, that might be something to spend a little time on, really thinking about what is my mandate or call to action for this group at this time. Sharing risk, this is interesting, right? Because we often have the urge to protect people. Sharing risk strengthens credibility and can improve your effectiveness in situations involving risk, because there are more than one person thinking they have some responsibility for what's happening, right? If it all rests on you and something happens to you, you could have people who feel like they don't really know where to turn or where to get answers and feel stymied and stopped by that. So I like this idea of sharing risk a lot. And I think it has given me a lot of food for thought about how am I sharing my challenges and my risks with my team? How am I helping them feel empowered and emboldened by the challenge and not overwhelmed and overly burdened or struck with fear, right, because of the challenge. So I like the tension that's there. And I think that part of the way we do that is we're transparent about what our challenges are. We invite people into the conversation. We let people know what we're thinking. And I think the other thing I think many of us understand about crisis is that there's a real need to talk about, to continuously orient the team. Here's where we are. Here's what we know. Here's what we don't know. Here's where we're going. Talk more about that. So as we look into the chat box once again, I'm curious just to grab your thoughts about how might a crisis like this pandemic develop you as a leader and your team as a team? And you could think about this in terms of what are you noticing? You could also think about like, I haven't really thought about this, but let me posit an idea or two. Would love to just see a little bit of reflection or chat about how you think this pandemic could actually catalyze and develop you or your team. Any thoughts?
We have more accountability,
Yeah.
better team efforts.
Mm-hmm. Oh, nice. More creativity and more energy and creativity, more supportive to colleagues. That's good to hear. Opportunities for leading groups put together to address challenges, using teams to collaborate, innovative, willing to risk. Yep. What's most differentiating about self, team, and business emerges. Yep. What's special about each of us shows up. Those who are more introverted are more willing to step up. That's been true. You're right, Stacey. Making me more communicative with everyone. Colleagues are supporting each other more. Yep. Lots of practice in self-management. I think everybody's not only practicing, but sharing their strategies. More communication, re-looking at what collective working looks like. Yeah, it's really interesting. Some barriers are down. We're more willing to take risks, I've noticed. We've tried some things at the Nebo company that we've talked about forever, but we weren't sure if they would work. We've just done them. And guess what? Some of them have worked. So, I think there's been more boldness, taking time to reflect more with each other. That's right. Um, there's a closeness and an intimacy that we're experiencing because of this. And it's, I know, ironic because we're remote, but I think gazing into each other's eyes through Zoom all day long has an impact as we work on rolling up our sleeves together and working to solve problems and address our near-term challenges. We think about more insights from the front lines. This is again from Kolditz's work. There's so much of the time we're focused as leaders inward, right, on our projects, on our priorities, on our strategies, right? But when there's a crisis happening, and this is again straight from the battlefields, from the front lines, there's a requirement that you focus outward, right? And you begin to think in terms of survival in a way that really moves people to action. Steve mentioned this a moment ago in the chat. There's a need to manage your own emotions. And I actually really appreciated that this was spelled out, and I wanted to share it with you. Don't get caught up in your own emotions when dealing with crisis or tragedy. Leading is about helping your organization grieve, not about how you as a leader feel. And I think that we sort of know this at some level, but I think if you're a leader who's kind of turning to your team a lot and kind of you're sort of you want to be vulnerable, you want to be open, you don't want to appear to be like a rock who does not feeling anything. But at the same time, it's really important to remember that people are looking to you to feel that you are confident, that you have strength, even if you don't have all the answers, that you have a perspective, right? So there is a need to manage your own emotions and not to radiate fear or grief or anxiety. If you're feeling those things, you might need to step out and do some self-care to bring yourself back to a balance that works better for leaders. Do establish rituals for handling hard news. This is an interesting one. This has been one of the reluctant things I've seen people doing, is realizing, we might lose somebody we care about, a family member, our employees might lose a colleague. How will we handle that? And what is the advice here is that give that a little forethought so that you don't have to be figuring it out in the moment. Make sure people know that they matter. This is really critical. Build loyalty and cohesion by sending an unmistakable message that people count and that the leaders in your organization are touched by the loss and struggle of others. This could look like personal outreach. It could look like a communication that's happening regularly, but it's really important to be giving this message continually. Saying it once at the beginning is not enough. In some way or another, you want to find ways to say it every week. I want to go into a little bit of Kouzes and Posner. These are some of our favorite researchers about the top qualities of leaders. And, these are timeless. They've been the top qualities through the hundreds of thousands of interviews and surveys that Jim Kouzes and Barry Posner have done over more than 3 decades. Notice what these words say: honesty, forward-looking, competent, and inspiring. Honesty, I think we saw that in our chat, right? Being honest, transparent. Forward-looking is tricky right now. This is where we're stymied, right? It's very hard to see the future. We'll talk in a minute about some strategies for still showing up as a forward-looking leader. Competence is a baseline, right? We need to be competent to have our jobs in the first place. But what does competence look like in a crisis? We'll talk a little bit about that. And then inspiring. How do you inspire when there are so many questions and when you yourself might not be feeling inspired right now? Some strategies for honesty. I think what I want to say here is making yourself visible and accessible and open. And I think being a leader, people feel like they can say whatever they need to say to. Having an honest and authentic response to that is really, really key. That means you have to manage your own reactivity, your own frustration, your own judgment, sometimes of that very person. Being transparent about decision-making, letting people know what you're thinking, why, what was the basis of a decision that you're making. And if you don't have answers, simply say so. It's better that, right, than to posture as if you do or should. And I think part of that for us as leaders is sort of like, we know this is common sense, but we have the urge to answer in a definitive way. Sometimes we aren't ready yet. So better to simply say, we don't have enough information yet. We'll let you know. Don't make promises you can't keep. And this one, again, it sounds so straightforward, but imagine your favorite staff member or someone who does great work, and you find yourself on the tip of your tongue saying, we might have to do furloughs, but I'm going to make sure that doesn't affect you, right? Or, I promise you we'll get through this, and unscathed. That urge to promise people things as leaders is very strong when people are feeling a lot of fear and anxiety, and we want to console. So again, pay attention to that. Try not to put a positive or a negative spin. Be as accurate, fact-based, I think someone in our chat said scientific, as possible. Use evidence to back up the position that you're taking, so that people understand, again, that you're grounded in some perspective. And then the last one is really simplify your message. It's a time when simpler messages, shorter words, more vernacular language lands a whole lot better than complicated, long messages. Being forward-looking is really interesting right now. We need to be forward-looking in the short term. What's the next 30 days about? What's the next 15 days about? We also need to be able to look past coronavirus. And it's been really interesting to try to figure out, when will the air clear, so to speak? And some people say 12 months, some people say 18, some people say 2 years. I would say, for your own purposes as a leader, pick a time frame that makes sense to you. I personally have decided to think, 2020 to 2022, April of 2022, I'm going to think of that as a 24-month period in which things are different. And I don't know what the future will look like after that, but I do know that this period of time in which we're directly affected by the coronavirus is probably at least a year and a half, probably maybe 2. So what can I see about the future post-coronavirus that I can aim for? And that's where we invite you to go back to your vision, if you're an organization with a vision, and ask yourself, what's in this vision that we can still target? What's in this vision that's still relevant? Reprioritize your strategies, define some urgent short-term goals to get people moving. And remember to keep tapping into your networks of advisors. Try to talk to as wide a range of advisors as you can, because it will help you maintain a situational awareness that you actually really need so that you can manage your own resilience and have good answers for other people. Your advisors could be your financial advisor, could be your lawyer, could be your, it could be reading a wide spread of newspaper reporting. It could be that you're tapping into think tanks. It could be that you're talking to close friends, people who look at the world from different perspectives. I know that at NEBO, we've gained an enormous amount of perspective from talking to our clients. So again, just keep that situational awareness as a critical part of how you can develop a perspective, and then speak as a forward-looking, forward-thinking leader to your constituents. Competence. This one to me is really interesting. We need you to be competent as a person, as a leader right now. Competence, trust, and loyalty are inextricably entwined. When you demonstrate competence, you develop trust and loyalty. So you need to take the time and effort to show your followers, your employees, what they're good at and why, what you are good at and why followers should be confident in you. So when we think about this, like, we have a tendency as leaders sometimes to gloss over our own depth of experience. You want to make a point to say, I have handled crises before. I was the person who made decisions during September 11th, for example. I have some experience with crisis management, or I have a good plan for crisis communication, and here's where it came from, right? Show people that you know what you're doing. You may not have all the answers, and you may be making it up as you go, but give them reasons to see you as competent. And this is a time to step forward and to step up as a leader, not to adopt a wait and see mindset where you feel like, oh, I'll have a meeting of the staff when I have more answers, when I have something to say. You want to actually make sure people can feel you and can feel that confidence. Make sure your staff keeps you informed. Sometimes people think their leaders don't want to be bothered. When that happens, you're actually losing some situational awareness. So you want to make sure people know that they have an open channel to you. Lastly, inspiring. How do you inspire others? These are some of the ways that you can do that. And I think some of the nicest ones here are a willingness to assume personal risk, right? So if there have to be tough decisions made, and for some reason you hold yourself out of experiencing that, that salary cut or that change, it sends a cue to people that you see yourself as other, right? So that willingness to assume personal risk, and again, this is an in extremis leadership model, is something that builds credibility and trust in you. Communicating clearly and confidently using examples, stories, metaphors, and your own personal experience. People want to feel you. I think that's my way of saying that today. Assigning important responsibilities to others. That's inspiring because it signals trust and that we're in it together. Reframing challenges, as someone said in the chat, so that we can see opportunities and the possibilities hidden within those opportunities, or the crisis itself has opportunities within it. Expressing gratitude daily, I would really make this a practice. Look out there and notice who's doing what that's great and what you could be saying thank you for. And then highlight progress and celebrate success, particularly around those near-term milestones that are so important right now. So how can we begin to bring the leadership that's needed right now? I'm going to let you think about that, but I want to emphasize to take care of yourself. If you are stressed and not actually doing that well, it's going to be really hard for you to stay compassionate and empathetic and effective with others. So putting your own oxygen mask on first is a critical requirement. We offer you the NEBO emotional intelligence check-in, which of course has a coaching angle. We ask questions. The self check-in, how am I doing? What do I need? Do you need a break? Do you need a day off? People in our company have been saying, I need a day off, but I don't really want to take one because I'm not going anywhere. And we've been saying, take one, right? So the answer to the question, how are you doing? What do you need? Is when you're able to turn your attention to the other person and begin to think about asking those questions. And I would, since we're virtual now, I would ask those questions very directly. How are you doing? What do you need? You will find that people need different things. Everyone's not needing the same thing. Here's an interesting tidbit from In Extremis Leadership, right? Staying connected with your team members is a priority right now. You have to become adept at reading individuals when the stakes are high. And one of the interesting things that Tom Colditz writes about is how in military settings, how crucial it is for commanders at all levels to be able to see the eyes of their team members and to be able to read the eyes so that they can actually see what someone is needing and thinking, whether or not that person is in other garb or other uniform. And I think that's really interesting because right now we're looking at each other virtually, but I think this idea that you have to continue to tune in to critical people on your team and to your team as a whole, and to think about this idea that we want to look at you, right? I want to see you, not just communicate out at you like a loudspeaker of some sort. So here are some strategies that have come our way through many conversations about how to stay connected. And by the way, you may know that I've been doing daily coffee. It's been a great success. I've had days where nobody comes. I have days where 6 people come, 3 people come, 8 people come. So that constant availability has been helpful. The daily huddle is also recommended. Just a quick, start of the day. Many of you are doing that. Some new ideas that have come out in the past couple of weeks are a regular pulse survey, just 3 questions. How are we doing? How are you doing? What's working? Where are you struggling? Just some kind of a quick survey to get a feel for what your team or your staff might need. And then consciously doing that one-on-one outreach. Someone also mentioned that they usually do this exercise called roses, buds, and thorns with their family. They've taken it into the workplace, and every week their team does, what were the roses this week? What were the highlights? What are the buds? Like the nascent exciting upcoming things, the things you're looking forward to, and what were the thorns? So using that. So I'm curious, does anybody have any additional ideas there? You can use the chat again. Maybe you're already doing all these and have a couple more. Nice, Stephanie. Collaborative Spotify playlist. Love it. That's a great idea. Daily messages on the internet is nice. Nebo Company is using GroupMe for informal, casual communications, and we've been playing Two Truths and a Lie, on focusing on a different person each week. Using technology to your advantage to stay connected in unique ways, like the virtual chef, check-ins, etc. The morning meditation with a friend, really nice, good. This list is growing, right? We're getting more and more creative and innovative, I think, as time passes. We're also getting pretty zoomed out. We're getting really weary of being in a relationship with our computers all day. So remember too that it's okay to start to select the things that are really working and make some things occasional and some things frequent, or change them up. Just because you thought of it in week 2 doesn't mean it's still a good idea, right, for week 7. Yes, Helene, my group's actually trying to call each other instead of Zoom all the time. That's a relief. It really is. You can move around better. You're not tied to the computer. Thank you. Good. So we're sharing those outreach strategies that are working well for everybody. And, with just a few minutes left, I wanted to highlight Arnie Sorensen of Marriott International, who I think has really modeled this quote from Brene Brown: "Courage starts with showing up and letting ourselves be seen." And he showed up right early on and was sort of famously now videoed, taped, giving a really tough message of furlough to his employees. And I think when I think about the message that he delivered and how he did it, I think he really is an example of someone who brought a message of determination and a message of heart. And so as we get to the end of our time, I'm going to have a second here, I think, for just a couple questions, but I want to share a quote from Arnie, and it's, "Be a source of hope." And interestingly, Tom Kolditz, again, in Extremist Leadership, says, "Don't be a source of optimism." He says, "Be a source of hope." And so the difference is optimism is a kind of a positive forecast, but hope is something that people can grab onto. And here's an example from Arnie. "While it's impossible to know how long this crisis will last, I know we as a global community will come through the other side. And when we do, our guests will be eager to travel in this beautiful world again. When that great day comes, we will be there to welcome them with the warmth and care we are known for the world over. Together we can and we will overcome this and will thrive once again." Thank you, Arnie, for offering us that picture of the future. That's an example, right, of being forward-looking. It's also an example of giving people something to work toward and to care about and to remember about themselves. So here's the book Daring Greatly by Brene Brown. We had a question about that. As we come to a close today, is there anything anybody would like to add to our comments? Dying to hear your voices, but I think we're using our chat feature that for this web series. Is there anything else that you'd like to express about being the Chief Resilience Officer? I think our biggest intent today has been to help you understand that this isn't business as usual, that there are these levels of fear and grief operating among our workforce, that you yourself are really managing all of that, and that in these times, there are some really clear, distinct things to do that make a difference. And that includes focusing outward, not making your own emotional struggle everybody else's concern, engaging and directing others in a motivated way, providing a source of hope, and also really appreciation and gratitude, compassion, all those wonderful words you guys shared when asked what you were looking for from leaders. And yes, we will save our chat. And I think, thank you, Helene, for the comment about how we're listening to each other better now. I really feel that way. And I know I'm finding myself listening better, and I'm sure that this is happening for most of us. You may find yourself fatigued. And if you do, remember it's your job to take care of yourself and to be a source of your own resilience. You're welcome to go to our website where we have previous webinars recorded that you can download, and also helpful blog posts with timely content that's relevant to right now. And we invite you to join us for our final webinar in the series, which is actually May 8th. So not next week, but the following week. And it's called The Insider's Guide to Leading in Uncertain Times. We're going to actually cut to the chase and help you figure out, of all the advice you're getting, which of the leadership strategies are the ones that really are working right now. And looking forward to having Steve Kolbeck share that with you. Thank you so much for being here and joining us. It is heartening and exciting to see your names and your perspectives in our chat. Thank you. Thank you, Helene. We'll say goodbye and have a great day and a nice weekend.